The shocking day when God defeated an army alone at midnight. You won't believe what happened. On a moonless night dripping with tension, a hush fell over the battlefield, thick as the fog creeping in from the hills. It was the kind of silence that made your skin prickle, as if the air itself held its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash. But instead of swords clashing, something unimaginable happened. As the opposing armies braced for engagement, a blast of thunder tore through the sky, not a storm in sight, but an otherworldly shout of divine power. Soldiers stood frozen, eyes wide, like deer caught in headlights. They could feel it, a weight pressing against them, unbearable and thrilling. With every booming echo, whispers of the supernatural curled through the ranks. A shimmering light appeared, glowing brighter than any campfire, casting long shadows that danced across faces now etched in fear. Each flicker held a truth, a promise of chaos yet to unfold. Those who saw it, eager to recount tales of glory, could only choke on their words, trembling, as this luminescent force took form, a figure clad in robes of flame, eyes ablaze with righteousness. They felt their hearts race, quickening like a racing train, wanting to flee, wanting to surrender, yet too hypnotized to act. Then came the sound of marching, heavy boots drumming against the earth, vibrating through the soldiers' very bones. But these were not the steps of men, they were the sounds of an army no one could see, an unseen legion. The ground itself shivered, as if trembling in reverence to an authority far greater than any they had ever faced. Was it an army of angels? Or perhaps the echoes of the unjust seeking vengeance under the cloak of night? No one could tell. The answers hung heavily, rippling through the souls of those caught in this impossible moment. And no sooner had the shock settled than it escalated. An unearthly wind whipped up, carrying with it the distinct smell of burning sage and something sweeter, something that made the men's stomachs churn. The air felt electric, as if a storm brewed just overhead, yet nothing in the sky displayed the signs of life. And then, amidst the chaos, a scream pierced the night, raw and desperate, shaking the very ground. The soldiers turned, eyes wide and breathless, searching for its source, their breaths hitching in their chests. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. In that moment of chaos, a screeching silence followed a collective gasp before the heavens erupted. A blinding flash from the figure lit the landscape, illuminating faces twisted in horror, some falling to their knees. Who was this warrior? What did he want? The questions clawed at their minds, curiosity crackled like static in the air. This wasn't just a battle now, it was a reckoning. As shadows of the invisible army loomed ever closer, the fear sank in deep, like a heavy stone lodged in the throat. The ground trembled again, a pulse thumping with a slow and steady rhythm. Would they survive to see the dawn? The glowing figure raised a hand, and the chilling anticipation gripped them. What was he about to unleash? And how could they hope to stand against a power so formidable? Those questions lingered like the fog, thick and curling around them, as the night dragged on, a prelude to the unspeakable. The air was charged, thick with tension as the mysterious figure lowered his hand, a flash of brilliance erupting from his palm. The soldiers recoiled, hearts pounding, skin prickling under the strain of unnatural energy. Murmurs swept through the ranks like wildfire. What was happening? No past war had prepared them for this. The clash of armies had turned into a spectacle of otherworldly proportions. As the light began to dim, a chilling silence engulfed the battlefield. A deep, resonant voice like rolling thunder broke through the still air, echoing like a warning across the plains. You stand on sacred ground, the time of judgment is upon you. The words twisted the hearts of men, solidifying their dread, yet igniting a sliver of hope within those brave enough to believe. But for many, it felt like the last flickers of a candle before it blew out. Suddenly, the air thickened as shadows elongated and merged, twisting into grotesque shapes. The invisible army now felt near, as the soldiers sensed movement around them, a cold breeze whispering through the pines. Ghostly figures flickered in and out of the light, faces contorted in pain and anger, lost souls dragged into the fray by the insatiable hunger of vengeance. The crowd shivered, eyes darting, searching for reassurance. Then came the sounds, the distant clash of metal, shouts of men who had long been forgotten. Each clamor reverberated through the ranks, a haunting reminder of mortality. No one could tell if these echoes belonged to the living or the damned, perhaps they were symbols of the choices made long ago, urging a reversal of fate in this moment of reckoning. The glowing figure locked eyes with those assembled, souls laid bare under his gaze. Within moments, he turned away, redirecting his focus toward the enemy camp, and suddenly, the collective murmurs transformed into chaos. The opposing army was not just frightened, they were retreating, a mass of bodies scrambling away from an unseen terror. In a flash, figures in the gathering storm leaped forth, angels clad in flickering light, shimmering swords drawn as they surged across the battlefield. Gasps erupted as men turned to face their pursuers, but it was too late, the tides of battle had shifted. Their fate hung precariously, like a thread on the verge of snapping. "Stand firm!" yelled the captain from the front lines, attempting to rally his men, his voice barely rising above the cacophony of panic. But as they looked towards the shadow of impending death looming over them, hope slipped through their fingers like grains of sand above the storm. The figure proclaimed, "You shall know fear, for through fear you may find redemption." Those haunting words hung heavy in the air, as the bright light spread like a wildfire, drying tears that mixed with the sweat and fear of soldiers. Yet, just as the forces surged forth, the figure began to dim. Would the light fade away, leaving the men vulnerable? Would they be at the mercy of unseen foes once more? The tremors in the ground persisted, an echo of curiosity and despair entwined in every soldier's heart as they faced the unknown. What dark truth rested behind those glowing eyes? And in this moment of revelation, could they, against all odds, alter their destiny? As the figure became an icon of mystery and hope, the determination to fight wavered between courage and despair. What lay ahead would test their very souls. The ground quaked beneath their feet, a living heartbeat resonating with fear and anticipation. Soldiers exchanged bewildered glances, their breaths shallow, as the light above began to pulse erratically, now flickering with intensity, then fading like a long-forgotten dream. Every man felt it, an essence of something powerful pressing against their chests, holding them captive in momentary silence before the storm. Then it came, a tide of chaos unlike any they had known. Whispers transformed into anguished wails as the ground erupted. The dark figures, those lost souls, surged forward hungry for revenge, craving to reclaim what lingered in the living realm. Fear clawed at their throats, and the air sizzled with tension as they drew close, eyes glowing like embers in the night. "Fall back!" a lieutenant shouted, desperation clawing at his words. Some obeyed, stumbling over one another, panic igniting their senses. The sound of hurried boots began to drown out the fading echoes of the unknown. But others, gripped by an almost magnetic pull, stood resolute, watching as the shadows approached. A soldier named Graham stumbled, his heart racing like a wild stallion. He glanced back. Where was that light? Where was the radiant figure who had brought this flicker of hope? His gaze darted around. The field was now a backdrop of chaos, stuck in a collision of dark and light. A scream broke free, piercing the air. "Look!" It came from a man huddled near the rear, pointing wildly. Graham followed his finger, his stomach tightening at the sight. The glowing figure, once at the forefront of power, seemed to be caught in a pulse of darkness, struggling to maintain form. There was something painful in its expression, a clash of purpose and desperation. With a burst of energy, the angels, still pure and luminous, clashed against the shadows. Blades of light met the writhing darkness, slicing through despair and illuminating the battlefield in blinding bursts. The screams of the damned rang out, an eerie symphony that echoed in the cracks of the earth. The glow began to flicker more, pulses matching the beat of fear in their chests. Borders of light expanded, stretching through the mass of frightened men. Could they grasp onto it? Could they fight for it, igniting their own flickering flames? Hope surged in Graham. "We can't give up," he shouted, determination coursing through him like a moth drawn to the flame. "We're not done yet." Rallying cries began to rise around him. One by one, soldiers exchanged their glances of dread, igniting them with fierce resolve. They began to step toward the glow, inching closer as if tethered by an unseen thread, rekindling a fragment of bravery. The shadows roared in fury, sensing their resolve, pressing into their ranks with violent intensity. But the figure above, was it weakening? Or was this perceived frailty a cunning trick, hiding amplifying strength? The glowing entity's eyes burned with determination as he seemed to exchange energy with the soldiers below. What deal was being struck in this profound moment? As the angels clashed with vengeance-wrecked souls, pain and fury erupted. Graham brandished his sword higher, refusing to yield to panic. This was more than a battle, it was a fraying bond between light and dark, and they were on the edge of a precipice. The soldiers fought tooth and nail, heartbeats synchronizing, finding strength in vulnerability. Hope was at the forefront, intertwining with dread, layering darkness with flickers of light. Yet, in the backdrop of what would soon be chaos unfolded an even darker mystery, the truth of what fueled this otherworldly battle. When the dust settled, would the veil of ignorance lift to reveal their true nature? Or would the battle consume them all, leaving only dark echoes once more? The figures clashed in front of their eyes, as soldiers stepped into legends, or were they simply walking into doom? As the day bled into shadows, the battle raged on, shedding light on secrets that should have stayed buried. What awaited them as night encroached upon the battlefield? Would they truly uncover their path, or would they become mere whispers among the shadows? Chaos charged the air as the clash of swords and shrieks of the damned merged into a nightmarish symphony. Graham held his ground, but every swing of his sword felt heavier. He could see soldiers to his left, faces twisted in disbelief, and to his right, a man collapsed under the pressure, his hands clutching the earth like a lifeline slipping through fingers. "Keep fighting," Graham shouted, his voice straining against the maelstrom. There had to be a reason why the light pulsed steadily, despite the looming shadows. A spark of hope ignited within him, flickering just as uncertainly. From above, the radiant figure was flickering, burning brightly yet dimming in swift, tragic strokes, like a candle held against a relentless draft. It seemed to entangle their fates, connecting Graham and his men to the cosmic battle unfolding. But could hope truly thrive in the midst of such annihilation? The shadows menaced, too close now, blocking out the last vestiges of sunlight. The air tasted of ash and dread. Hushed murmurs passed between the soldiers, worry creeping in beneath the shell of bravado. "What if we can't win?" One murmured, his voice a ghost beneath the cacophony. Others shushed him, unwilling to entertain the thought, yet the fear hovered unspoken and heavy. Graham looked around, seeing doubt in the eyes of the men he had fought beside for years. "Remember why we fight," he bellowed. "For our families. For hope." He stepped forward, leading the charge, leading himself into the fray with purpose that reached beyond mere survival, and then the darkness surged. A wave, surging like a monstrous flood, crashed over them, pulling at their feet and dragging them toward despair. Shadows twisted and thrashed, their voices hollering twisted mockeries of laughter. Graham's heart pounded as his grip tightened around the sword's hilt. In that moment, among the chaos, enlightenment crashed over him. What if they had unwittingly summoned this nightmare? Every legend whispered across campfires spoke of ancient curses. The very ground upon which they fought might have been stained with sins long past. Did this battle exist only to punish them for those sins? Would they pay for others' mistakes? His mind spiraled. If the fallen souls sought revenge, could it be they were linked to him, his past, a lineage that seeped into the earth like poison? The pulsing light flickered like a failing heartbeat, and Graham's determination turned molten fury. "No. We want to fall." He charged forward, leading his men into the rapidly closing maw of darkness. Behind him, rallying cries filled the air, carried hope mingling with panic, determination mixing with despair. Suddenly, the radiant figure fell dim, then, as if called forth by some unseen force, a blinding flash engulfed the battlefield. Time froze. The attacks halted, the howls of anguish and the despairing cries dissolved into an eerie silence. The soldiers shielded their eyes. Light swirled, a tornado of energy that began to shape itself into a majestic form. A presence, powerful and familiar, stepped into view. It reached out into the depths of darkness, and, for a heartbeat, Graham felt the rush of profound calm wash over him. "What is that?" someone whispered, awe-stricken. The soldiers stood frozen as the figure grew brighter, illuminating the night, shattering the gripping fear. But the tableau held a deeper promise. Was it salvation or something far more cryptic? As the pressure mounted, Graham realized this moment held the weight of statues and songs, the crux of legends about to be born. But what sacrifice would this power demand? Would it cost them everything they held dear? In that breathless stillness, while hope flickered like a dying star, the shadows roared anew, enraged and ravenous, ready to consume. What lay ahead would leave the fabric of their reality trembling. What would they discover in this unwavering clash of forces, and could they survive the truth that awaited them as the night embraced their battle? The blinding light enveloped them, a stark contrast to the claustrophobic darkness that had threatened to swallow their hopes. Graham's heart raced as the figure drew nearer, illuminating the faces of his comrades around him. Expressions shifted from fear to awe, confusion melting into tentative hope. "Look. It's them," a soldier shouted, pointing. His voice pierced the stillness like a dagger. Indeed, emerging from the vortex of light were the lost souls of long-ago warriors. Clad in ethereal armor, they gathered slowly, their features serious yet resolute. Graham could feel the weight of ancient wisdom in their presence. Are they here to help us? Came a breathless murmur from the back. The question hung heavily in the air, mingled with disbelief and desperation. The radiant entity stepped forward, bathed in brilliance, its voice washing over the battlefield like a bomb. We have come to grant you strength, it proclaimed, echoing through the throbbing silence. Your fight is not only a battle of flesh but a reckoning for the living and the dead. Graham's grip tightened on his sword as he stepped into the light. Why us? What do you want from us? He shouted, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. To rise against the darkness, you must reclaim what was lost, the figure replied, their gaze piercing through him. You must face the shadows within. A chill ran through him. Shadows within. Those lingering fears and regrets. The weight of ancestral sins crept into his mind, squeezing at his chest like an iron grip. Almost in response, the thrumming darkness responded, surging forward like an unleashed wave. The soldiers staggered back, yet the ethereal presence held its ground, standing firm against the tide. Fight it. Remember what you stand for. It urged, locking eyes with Graham. Shadows twisted, forming grotesque figures, echoing the doubts and guilt that lurked in the corners of his mind. It's hopeless. One version of himself screamed, conflict raging behind his eyes. You can't change the past. You're destined to fail. The spectral warriors beside the radiant figure advanced, drawn into the fray, their swords glistening with otherworldly light. Your past will not dictate your future. Together, we rise. Their voices melded into a single resounding call, igniting something deep within Graham. Rally to me. He yelled, charged with fervor. We can fight this together. He felt the energy surging in response, an unseen force flowing through him as if the very essence of these ghostly warriors bolstered his resolve. The soldiers hesitated but then instinctively began to form ranks behind Graham. Inspired by this undeniable surge of collective strength, they surged forward against the oncoming shadows. Graham led them in a fierce clash, unrelenting and unwavering. Light clashed with darkness, illuminating twisted faces of grief and fury while resolute souls pierced through despair. Graham swung his sword, each stroke resonating with newfound purpose. Every parry, every thrust became a testament to their journey, a defiance against the ghost that haunted him. But just as victory seemed to glimmer on the horizon, the very earth trembled beneath them. A low rumble echoed from the shadows, something primal and undulating, promising a wrath that had not yet been revealed. They are not finished. The darkest night has yet to come. Graham felt it, an impending storm. The realization struck hard. Everything they had faced was merely a gateway to something far worse. A chill swept through the men, robbing their bravery, but Graham stood taller. What is coming? He shouted into the blaring silence. The radiant being's form flickered momentarily, its responses now eerily uncertain. A greater sacrifice awaits. The choices you make now will carve out your fate. As the ground quaked beneath them and shadows loomed larger, Graham knew the battle was only beginning. With each passing moment, the stakes only grew higher. How deep would they have to dig to fight their own shadows and survive a dark cloud yet to descend? What sacrifice lay ahead, and who would pay it? The ground shook violently, the vibrations glowing at their feet. Graham tightened his grip on his sword, adrenaline coursing through his veins like fire. His comrades huddled close, eyes wide, breaths shaky. The radiant entity shimmered, its form flickering with intensity, barely holding its shape against the looming darkness. Prepare yourselves. It screamed, its voice now a clarion call echoing through the chaos. The time for reckoning is upon you. From the depths of shadow, a figure coalesced, a massive silhouette that danced on the edges of reality. It advanced, each movement causing the very air to crackle with a sense of dread. Graham's heart pounded against his ribs like a war drum, resonating with every surge of dark energy. The soldiers quaked, doubt creeping into their minds, threatening to unravel their hard-won resolve. Stay steady. He shouted, more for his own reassurance than theirs. We faced this together. But fear had a tight grip on the men. Some shivered, others stumbled back, retreating into a vortex of despair where hope was relegated to mere memory. The twisted shadows swarmed around the emerging figure, howling like lost souls. They whispered Graham's deep-seated fears, amplifying his doubts until they were deafening. You will fail. You are unworthy. In a heartbeat, the shadows lunged, grasping for the living. Graham's instincts kicked in. He charged, leaping into the fray. The spectres, with their hollow eyes and contorted mouths, sparked rage within him. He swung his sword, its blade slicing through the darkness like a beacon of defiance. Light met shadow, exploding into shards that scattered like stars across a blackened sky. The spectral warriors rallied behind him, their ghostly forms glowing brighter with each clash. They slashed through the darkness, illuminating the grip of shadows that sought to swallow them whole. Together, they became a cacophony of power and fury, a storm unleashed against despair. Remember. Fight for each other. Graham cried, feeling the weight of the burden he carried multiply. He glanced back at his comrades, their faces painted with both fear and resolve. Don't just defend. Attack. He urged, finding strength in the shared struggle. With a renewed fervor, the soldiers surged forward, a wave crashing against the shore of fear, but as they pushed deeper, a shriek echoed through the battlefield. The primal roar of the dark figure erupted, shattering the air. It was a sound that punctured the very essence of courage, stripping them of their bravado, forcing Graham to fall back. Suddenly, a sudden breath of wind swept over them, carrying with it a sense that everything would change. The battlefield warped, colors bleeding into a surreal tableau of chaos. Graham felt the ground underfoot shift. He stumbled but held his ground. A flicker of light pulsed from within him, reminding him of the ethereal being as promised. Together, we are more. The voice within whispered, igniting a spark of hope. The shadows hesitated, flickering as if unsure of their strength. Yet a creeping darkness curled around Graham's feet, slithering up his legs as if to consume him. With a scream that erupted from the core of his being, he called out, "We will not fall." He struck the ground, and in that moment, a divine surge unfurled within him, erupting outward like wildfire. Bands of light shot across the battlefield, intertwined with the screams of the vanquished, but darkness swirled, pushing back, relentless. The fear tightened its grip once again, and Graham felt the weight of impending doom bearing down. What must I sacrifice? He wondered, desperation clawing at his throat. Just then, a rumbling voice echoed through the air. Not all sacrifices are what they seem, as Graham strained to understand. The world erupted into chaos around him. The shadows coalesced, and from their depths came the horrifying truth he had feared all along. What price would be demanded? What took hold, leaving behind empty vessels of grief and loss? His heart raced, sensing the answer lay beneath the surface, hidden within the darkened haze around them. What sacrifice would they have to make to confront the horrors yet to come? The shadows began to pulse and swirl violently around Graham, their forms twisting as if alive, searching for his vulnerabilities. He clenched his teeth, fighting the rising tide of despair that coiled in his gut. Not today. He roared as he struck out again, but for every foe he felled, two more appeared from the abyss. It felt hopeless. The air grew thick and heavy, thick enough to suffocate. His comrades struggled against the tide, their faces pale mirrors of doubt. The adjacent soldiers faltered, weapons trembling in their grips, eyes darting nervously. The dark figure loomed larger now, its features sharpening to a monstrous clarity. Graham caught a glimpse of its eyes, bits of utter darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. An icy stab of fear struck him. It was no mere being, it embodied every loss, every regret. Graham blinked away the uncertainty, recalling the radiant entity as promise, though the memory was fleeting. "Stand with me," he shouted, desperation driving his voice. "We've come too far to back down now." But silence enveloped him, a heavy shroud, as the soldiers around him faltered. Suddenly, a blinding flash ignited across the battlefield. The radiant being surged forward, its light breaking through the oppressive gloom. It stood tall and resolute, shining brilliantly against the dark horde. "For every soul that fears," it boomed, "there is a light that stands resolute." An electrifying pulse shot through Graham, igniting his heart with newfound resolve. The darkness recoiled, momentarily unnerved. "You are nothing," it hissed, its voice scraping like nails on a chalkboard. But this time, Graham felt different. The surge of light bathed him in warmth, clarity slicing through his fears like a knife. With each breath, he drew strength from within. The whispers of doubt quieted. "We are not alone." The ghostly warriors surged around him, gathering their strength anew, feeding off the radiant energy. They dove into the abyss, striking fiercely against the dark figure, wrapping it in brilliant luminescence. But the shadows fought back, howling as the light pierced their shrouds, revealing twisting faces of anguish. Each a soul lost the cost of their continued existence. Graham's resolve wavered as he faced the truth in their eyes. What if defeating it means losing more than we can bear? The thought gripped him like a vice, threatening to unravel him from within, but the entity spoke through the chaos, its voice steady and unwavering. To confront the darkness, one must shine their light brightest. The balance can only be restored through sacrifice. Graham's heart raced. Sacrifice echoed in his mind, a bitter taste, a weaving of fate. It clawed at him, an intimation of what lay ahead. Just then, thrust into his thoughts amid the overwhelming tidal wave of darkness and chaos, he felt a surge of determination he hadn't thought possible. I want to let fear dictate my fate. He cried out, rallying the spectral forces to him. Together, we'll ignite hope. They surged forward, a whirlwind of light and shadow, battling the dark figure that seemed to stretch infinitely. The clash was thunderous, like waves crashing violently upon a rocky shore. Graham ripped through the chaos, his sword a blazing torch illuminating the night. But even as they advanced, a sinking dread clawed at his insides. Something is wrong, he muttered under his breath, unease creeping over him. The shadows were changing form, morphing into chaotic shapes that twisted reality itself, blurred lines retreating into a darker abyss. How had they become so strong? As they pressed forward, a deafening roar erupted, pulling the fabric of the battlefield apart. In that moment, clarity struck. Victory would demand more than courage, sacrifice would be imminent. What could I possibly lose? Graham gasped, dread settling heavy in his chest. With the battle raging around him, he prepared to face the dark truth lurking beneath. What cost would freedom exact? Would they simply become the next victims in a cruel game of fate? The very essence of sacrifice hung in the air, begging to be confronted. As Graham pressed on, a chilling thought struck him: was this fight truly his to win? In the depths of the dark, the answers awaited, whispering through the shadows. What choices lay ahead, waiting to entangle him in their deadly embrace? The battlefield was alive with chaos, a whirlwind of light and shadow crashing together in a dance of desperation. Graham's heart raced as he faced the dark figure, its form shifting unexpectedly, like wisps of smoke in a tempest. Each pulse of darkness felt like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of him. He'd never seen anything like it, a manifestation of fear and loss so palpable it made his skin crawl. Focus! He shouted to himself, but doubt clawed viciously at his mind. The radiant entity pulsed beside him, its glow a beacon amidst the gloom. This bond our fears, it binds us, strength drawn from our collective struggles. The truth resonated deep within Graham. Suddenly, the faces of those he had lost flashed before him, each loss a sharp blade, each memory a weight. He couldn't afford to falter now. With resolve thrumming in his veins, he gripped his sword tighter. We fight together. We sacrifice together if it means we can bring them back. The words spilled out, bold and defiant, igniting a flicker of determination in the soldiers around him, but then, a scream broke through the cacophony, raw and piercing. Graham! Behind you! It was Kelly, a fearless warrior at his side, pointing desperately into the maelstrom. Graham spun, barely in time to see a wave of shadows surging toward him, a roiling mass of despair, and it was hungry. Stay in formation. He barked, though his voice shook with fear. The ground trembled, the darkness curling around his comrades like serpents grasping for their hearts. He noticed the ghostly figures around him flickering, struggling against the encroaching darkness. He lunged forward, fury igniting his every move as he swung his sword, slicing through the air with a fierce energy. Light pierced some shadows, their anguished faces momentarily illuminated against the night. But for every creature he struck down, the gaps refilled with greater strength, more sorrow. The dark figure loomed larger, its laughter echoing in his ears, a chilling reminder of the futility of his efforts. Increase your light. The radiant entity implored, its voice reverberating through the thickening atmosphere. Trust in your bond. You are the illuminators of hope. Just then, a bright flash erupted, blinding him momentarily. When his vision cleared, he stumbled back, a gasp escaping his lips. The shadows had morphed again. They coalesced into familiar forms, friends lost to battles fought long ago. Their once bright eyes were now ink-like voids, a haunting reflection of what lay in the depths of despair. Graham, they whispered, their voices like the rustle of dead leaves. No. He yelled, shaking his head violently. You are not real. You are just a trick. But the pain was undeniable, digging into his heart. He couldn't lose them again. A fear crept in, familiar yet terrifying. What if it was a trick? What if this dark manifestation could resurrect the past, drawing him in with the promise of loved ones? The air crackled with a tension he could hardly stand. Sacrifice, the shadows lured, their voices now a chorus of desperation, a melody of longing that pulled at his spirit. Join us, Graham, we can find peace together. He choked back tears, fighting the urge to join them, to succumb to the shadows. I want tea. I refuse. He felt the power of the radiant entity coursing through him, but the weight of looming sacrifice gnawed at his resolve. As the army advanced, he glanced at Kelly, her face drawn tight with fear yet resolute. We're not giving in, are we? She breathed, and he saw the fire flicker in her eyes, a reminder of their shared purpose. Never, as long as we stand together. He vowed, though a fevered panic writhed in his guts, but around them, the battlefield erupted. The ground trembled, rifts splitting the earth, shadows weaving tighter, threatening to consume the fading light. Graham knew the battle was far from over, the climax was yet to unfold, and the ultimate prize was looming. Deep down, a question festered: was anyone truly prepared for what lay ahead? Would they leave a part of themselves, or even more, to defeat the darkness? The answer lingered just out of reach. What choice would he ultimately make when push came to shove? The tremors intensified, the ground quaking like it had a life of its own. Graham stumbled, struggling to keep his footing as the shadows spiraled closer. He could feel the weight of despair pressing against him, thick and suffocating. As he stood firm, the radiant entity beside him surged with a blinding light, illuminating the dark forms before them, yet casting long shadows that whispered their doubts. Graham. Kelly's voice cut through the chaos again. She lunged to his side, sword drawn, her grip tight with determination. We need to create a path. We can't let them surround us. Right. He shouted back, forcing his throat to untangle the fear lodged there. Together, they moved like a dance, striking against the pooling blackness that swirled at their feet. Each slash of their swords igniting bursts of light that momentarily pushed the shadows back, revealing flickering glimpses of what lay beyond. It was then Graham spotted a flicker of hope in the distance, a shimmering portal that pulsed with untapped energy. Look. He pointed, his heart hammering. We need to reach that light. It could lead us to escape. Kelly's eyes brightened. But can we fight our way through? The exchange was interrupted by a roar of darkness, fierce and overwhelming. The dark figure loomed large, almost as if it had been waiting for this moment. You think you can escape? Your souls are mine, it taunted, its voice slithering through the air. Shadows writhed around it, stirring the memory of every loss, every regret within Graham. No. You don't own us. He yelled, even as an icy grip clutched at his heart. Every fear threatened to drag him down, but he wouldn't let it. Not now. Rallying the remaining soldiers, he shouted, we push forward. We have to fight for each other, fight for every lost moment. His voice rang with fierce conviction, igniting the energy around him. They formed a tight circle, weapons raised, pushing through the darkness with the relentless force of unified will. But the shadows retaliated, swirling with blinding speed, morphing into grotesque figures, past allies twisted into monsters of their own regrets. Graham, remember us. They swooped in, filled with a promise of solace. Join us, and you can see them again. A lump formed in Graham's throat. The temptation clawed at him, but he cast it aside, his heart pounding. You aren't real. You're a lie. The radiant entity at his side flared brighter, sending a shockwave of pure light that sliced through the illusion. Channel our fear into this light. It's what makes us strong. It urged, as the energy surged through him, igniting a fire he thought he'd lost. Together, they flooded the battlefield with their collective brilliance, each flicker of light pushing against the overpowering darkness. As they surged forward, an impossible truth dawned on him. It wasn't just about escaping the shadows, but confronting them. The energy flowed stronger, propelled by memories that weren't just losses, they were also fortresses of hope, reminders of resilience. With a roar, they pushed into the heart of the shadowed figure, a tidal wave against the tide of despair, but the shadows retaliated, a vile scream erupting from the darkness as it began to dissipate, only to lash out with edges sharp as daggers. Graham felt a pain slice across his arm as a shadowy tendril found its mark. Graham. Kelly cried out, tugging him back. We can't afford to lose anyone now. Graham staggered, blood dripping from the wound, yet it seemed to fuel him instead. We need to reach that light. It's our last hope. As they pushed against the final remnants of despair, a blinding surge erupted, igniting a battle within. Would he give in to the pain, or would he step into the light of what was still possible? The choice loomed before him, unwavering and profound. What darkness was he willing to confront in order to reclaim his truth? Would he sacrifice himself for hope, or would the shadows win yet again? Uncertainty painted the air thick as the battlefield surged towards its inevitable climax. As the battlefield surged with an intensity that echoed across the night, Graham drew in a shuddering breath. The shadows, once looming and oppressive, began to recede as if recognizing a power they could not contain. He felt the pulse of his comrades rallying around him, their spirits merging with the brilliant light of the ethereal entity. Hope, fragile yet fierce, ignited within them all. Together. For each other. Graham shouted, his voice echoing like a war drum amid the chaos. The spectral warriors surged alongside them, their eyes aflame with purpose. The dark figure, still monstrous, shrieked in fury. You think your courage can save you? It roared, thrashing against the tide of light. Shadows twisted like living tendrils, striking out towards Graham and his allies, but each attack met with resolute strength. With a renewed fervor, Graham pressed forward. Kelly stood to his left, her eyes fierce and unwavering, a reminder of all they had fought for. We can do this, Graham. We just need to believe. In a flash of insight, Graham understood. This battle was not just against the darkness outside, it was also a confrontation with what lay buried within them all. The losses, regrets, and sorrows tangled deep inside like barbed wire. Some of us have to face our pasts. He yelled into the chaos, rallying their thoughts. Focus on what we have lost, and let it fuel our fight. The soldiers began to gather strength from their memories of those gone. Faces of loved ones flared in their minds, each sentiment a blazing beacon against the encroaching night. They surged forward, a wall of determination, each shout and swing of their weapons sending waves of brilliance washing over the battlefield, but the shadows roared, morphing into haunting reflections, specters of despair aimed at the very heart of every soldier. You don't belong here. They hissed, the voices a collage of promises unkept. Many faltered, faces twisting with fear and doubt. No. Kelly shouted, not just for herself but for all of them. Fight back. Her voice sliced through the murmur of despair, reigniting their will to stand. Graham swung his sword, catching a glimpse of her brave spirit lighting up the darkness around them. With a roar, he charged, bolstered by her strength. We keep going. We take back what is ours. He pressed into the thrumming heart of darkness, pushing against the growing void. Graham could see a flicker in the distance, the shimmering portal breathless, awash with light. Souls waiting to be reclaimed. He thought back to the radiant entity, and its voice thundered in his mind, the sacrifice must come from within. You must face and accept your truths. Suddenly, everything snapped into place. Fearing the shadows had meant to deny their very essence. What had broken them must also be what would mend their spirits. Find your light. Graham cried, feeling a swell rising in his chest. With stark clarity, he let the pain of every loss wash over him. What we carry is more than grief, it is our strength. And with every drop of anguish, the shadows frayed away, giving in to the radiant energies around him. The darkness screamed, a wailing symphony of rage and despair, but Graham and his allies surged forward, hearts ignited, ready to reclaim all they had lost. Now. He roared, launching toward the portal. A bolt of light erupted from the entity above, merging with their resolve, forming a brilliant cyclone that tore into the depths of night. In one final clash, the shadows disintegrated into wisps of smoke, the echoes of their voices fading at last. The dark figure writhed in agony as it began to dissolve, its laughter shrinking into a distant whisper. Victory was near. Graham could feel it in the pulse of each soldier beside him. The brightness closed in, wrapping around them, engulfing them within the warmth of redemption. What have we lost, we can reclaim. Graham shouted triumphantly as they burst through the portal. An explosion of light engulfed them, pain lifted, and darkness faded entirely, and then they were standing on the field they once fought for. Illuminated by dawn. Faces reflected the relief, the joy, the understanding of what they had just accomplished. Graham looked over to Kelly. She wasn't just a warrior beside him, she was family in this newfound hope. They had fought for their memories, but now they could also cherish them without pain. As they began to walk back, the sun rising slowly over the horizon, the air felt different, lighter, filled with possibilities. They were no longer merely survivors of a battle past. They were conquerors of the shadows within, holding tightly to the light that had guided them home. As the first rays of daylight broke over the land, Graham turned to his comrades, feeling unity settle in his chest. Together, we rewrite our stories, he said, his voice steady. One by one, the soldiers nodded, hearts full, faces turned toward the future, and as they walked away, leaving the battlefield behind, they understood their fight had shaped them into something greater, warriors forged not just in struggle, but in the power of hope, connection, and the beautiful complexity of being human. Hold tight to that light, friends. You need to subscribe now. You want to miss what comes next. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. I want to hear your reactions. Flood the comments with your thoughts. What do you think happened next? Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's keep this community alive and connected.